All right, let's dive into one of the most explosive and just fascinating puzzles in all of history. We're going to explore how a crucified Galilean preacher came to be worshipped as God by his very first followers. So, how did this happen? Let's get into it. The entire mystery really boils down to this single staggering question. The first Christians, they were Jews. And for them, there was only one God, the God of Israel, period. So how on earth did they make the leap from that absolute conviction to worshiping Jesus of Nazareth? That is the puzzle we're going to try and unpack.
To really get the scale of this problem, you have to put yourself in their shoes, back in the world of Second Temple Judaism. For them, monotheism wasn't just some belief they held, it was the absolute, non-negotiable center of their entire identity, their entire universe.
And that's the crucial thing to understand. We're not talking about a minor theological disagreement here. Worshipping a man, or any created being for that matter, was idolatry. It was the most profound betrayal of their faith you could possibly imagine. This created a huge, seemingly insurmountable barrier to the kind of devotion Jesus started to receive. Now, you might be thinking, okay, a belief this radical must have taken centuries to develop, right? Slowly evolving, getting influenced by other ideas along the way. But what's so wild is that modern scholarship suggests the exact opposite happened.
What's so interesting here is how it shows this massive shift in thinking. The old theory was that, as more non-Jews came in, pagan ideas slowly pushed the church towards seeing Jesus as divine. But scholars like Larry Hurtado have argued that a very high Christology, that's the belief in Jesus' full divinity, didn't just trickle in. No, it exploded onto the scene right at the very beginning, inside the earliest Jewish Christian circles. And this quote just nails it. This group of scholars, sometimes playfully called the early High Christology Club, they use this Big Bang metaphor to describe what happened. It wasn't a slow burn, it was an instantaneous, high-energy event. And honestly, that just makes our central question even more urgent. What could possibly have caused such a sudden and dramatic mutation in belief?
So, how do we explain it? Well, the academic world has come up with several really powerful theories. We're going to take a look at three of the most influential explanations for this theological Big Bang.
So the first theory, which scholars like Andrew Loke champion, argues that the starting point was Jesus himself. The idea is that this wasn't something the disciples just invented after he died. Instead, they came to worship Jesus because he actually claimed to be divine during his own lifetime, and they saw the resurrection as God's ultimate stamp of approval on those very claims. Next up, Richard Bauckham offers a much more nuanced view. He argues the early Christians didn't break their monotheism by adding a second God. Instead, they expanded their definition of the one God. Jesus was understood as being included within God's unique divine identity, sharing in his rule over all creation. So for Bauckham, it wasn't a break from monotheism, but a radical redefinition of it from the inside out.
Okay, our third theory is a bit of a mind-bender, but it's totally fascinating. The theologian Wolfhart Pannenberg came up with this future-first idea called prolepsis. He argued that Jesus' divinity wasn't something obvious during his life. Instead, the future event of the resurrection acted almost like a key that unlocked the past. It retroactively revealed and even established who Jesus had been all along. It's like the ending of the story defines the beginning. Wild, right?
This table gives us a fantastic summary. Just look at the subtle but really crucial differences in the role of the resurrection. For Locke, it vindicates what Jesus already claimed. For Bauckham, it reveals an identity that was always there. And for Pannenberg, it actually establishes that identity. You can see how each of these thinkers is wrestling with the same evidence, but putting the emphasis in a different place, on Jesus' words, on Jewish theology, or on the resurrection itself.
But here's the thing. Each of these theories, which try to explain how Jesus came to be seen as God, well, they raise another, even deeper problem. If Jesus was truly divine, how could he also be truly human? How could God get tired, or hungry, or not know things? This paradox led to some really profound theological thinking. One of the most intriguing solutions is something called kenotic Christology. That word kenosis, it comes from the Greek for to empty. The theory basically suggests that to become fully human, the Son of God voluntarily chose to set aside or empty himself of certain divine privileges, like being all-knowing or all-powerful. So the logic kind of works like this. The Son temporarily puts some of his divine attributes on the shelf, so to speak, so he can experience a genuinely limited human existence. This idea allows for a Jesus who could learn and grow and suffer while still maintaining that he was, at his very core, fully divine. It's a way of trying to take both his divinity and his humanity completely seriously.
So what's the big takeaway here? Well, the most important point is that this is not a solved case. Far from it. The origin of this belief in a divine Jesus remains one of the most vibrant and intensely debated topics in historical and theological scholarship today.
And these are the questions that keep that debate raging. Was the Big Bang triggered by Jesus himself or by the post-resurrection experiences of his followers? Was this whole thing a mutation of Judaism or a whole new species of religion? And can history alone ever really account for a belief that completely changed the world? These are the fault lines of the whole discussion. And that leaves us right here with the final question. We've looked at three compelling theories: a man who claimed divinity for himself, an expansion of God's own identity, and a future that redefined the past. Each one offers a piece of the puzzle, but none of them solves it completely. The question of how a crucified man became God, it continues to challenge and fascinate us 2,000 years later.